Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Van Lang, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today, both as your host and as a board member of the Psychedelics Association of Canada. For those of you who don't know me, while I do run my own consulting firm where I work with clients inside and outside of the psychedelic space, I have a long and storied career in corporate Canada in communications and public relations. And as part of that, I spent nearly a decade as a senior executive at Cineplex. And that's our panel is actually all Americans, but Cineplex is one of Canada's largest movie and entertainment companies. And there I developed a really deep appreciation for storytelling and its ability to shift perspectives and inspire change. So I am excited to be here and to bring that passion to today's webinar, where I hope that we'll be able to dive into the unique world of psychedelics and filmmaking, a genre that not only tells compelling stories, but also can open minds and it can explore consciousness in different ways and in innovative ways. The PAC itself grew out of a shared vision to bring psychedelics into the mainstream thoughtfully and responsibly. As a Canadian not-for-profit, we work hard to build connections across the country, from medical and therapeutic professionals and researchers to educators and advocates and artists like we are talking to today. And all of us share a united commitment to the responsible integration of psychedelic medicine. So today's webinar is really a testament to just that. And we have the privilege of hearing from three incredible filmmakers who are all at the forefront of their movement. So Dream Mullick is here, we have Aize Jama Everett, and we have Maxie Cohen. And shortly, I'll ask them to introduce themselves and talk to you about their backgrounds and talk to you about what drives them and talk about their work. And they're also going to share a trailer of their film. After those introductions, we're going to talk. We're here. It's a panel discussion, so we're going to have a discussion. And there we'll dive deeper into talking about their creative processes. They'll ask each other questions. And most importantly, we'll talk about the role of psychedelics in storytelling. And then we'll open questions to the floor. So over the course of this whole conversation, if you have questions or if you think of a really inspiring question, I've done my homework. So I've tried to develop as many thoughtful questions as I possibly could. But you guys are the experts here. So please put your questions as we go in the chat. We have a team behind the scenes that are reviewing them. And we've dedicated time to answer those questions specifically. So I thought that was important to share, but no further ado, let's get to meeting our panelists. So Dream, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your work?
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And it's so good to be on with all of you today. Let's see, what can I share? My name is Dream Mullick, and I wear many hats in the world. I work often at the intersection of ceremony and science, creating educational curriculum. So bringing the ceremonial aspects and the scientific aspects of psychedelics into the same conversation. I also have a teaching practice and a coaching practice. I work with death and psychedelics and grief and mystical experiences and so many different hats, but in this particular role, I am a producer. I am co-producing a documentary on Rick Doblin and the 50-year journey to legalize psychedelics for the treatment of PTSD. And I'm co-producing that film with my brother, Nirvan Mullick, who's also directing the project. And that gives you just a little bit of background and a sense of me. Sarah, did you have any questions specifically that I could explore?
Well, where are you might be one. You've got like this exceptional background and a beautiful glow. So I'm guessing you're not, well, it's still kind of summertime in Canada, but where are you would be a lovely, if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you. I love bringing in the land wherever I am. So in this moment, I am in Maui. I recently relocated from one beautiful place to the next, from Big Sur, California to Maui, Hawaii. And so grateful to be bringing in all of the beauty of the land to the conversation today. So that's where I'm coming in from.
Beautiful. And I will also say that behind the scenes, there's our wonderful fearless volunteer, Gordon. He's here with us. So we're going to call out to Gordon to help us with playing the clip. So Gordon, we are ready for the first trailer. Thank you, Dream. It's beautiful. And I want to also highlight the URL that she had at the end of her trailer there. These are all artists that need your support. So I just want to remind you of that. There's going to be more trailers and more links, but I just wanted to emphasize that one piece. Dream, I can't wait to talk about your film.
Thank you so much.
Aize, you're next. Tell us a little bit about yourself. We can say, where are you from? You don't have palm trees behind you, though.
I wish I did.
Me too. Me too. Pleasure
Yeah.
to thank you for being here today. What tell us about yourself?
Thank you so much for having me, Canada. I've as a African American, Canada has been the promised land for many of us for a long time. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to a Canadian audience. It's so fun, Dream, that looks like a beautiful documentary. I can't wait to watch it. And while like I'm very aware of the Maps crew and I've met Rick and hung out with Rick, and there's a lot that I really appreciate about their work. I think even in some of that trailer, you see what an African American might have a few problems with when it comes to the psychedelic space. I think I counted one Black person in all of the footage, which is nothing against you or even nothing against Maps, but rather just what the psychedelic space looks like to African American people. So by and large, I don't talk about psychedelic space. I talk about medicine work. I talk about plant medicine because that is a more culturally responsive term. And that's actually the terminology that I sort of came up in and came up around. I'm from New York originally, but I've been living in Oakland, California for most of my life. It's the second city in the US to decriminalize psychedelics. And while I wasn't part of some of those meetings, I've been doing work with psychedelics since around 2003. After getting first a master's in divinity and then a master's in clinical psychology. Both of those degrees were a way of sort of validating some of the spiritual and religious traditions that I grew up in. So a lot of this psychedelic work or plant medicine work for me is very tied to spirituality and very tied to, a sense of place and sense of self beyond the mundane, if you will. When people talk about, using psychedelics to treat PTSD, I always say that's like an adolescent being restricted to the diet of an infant. Like that there's so much more healing and so much more work that can be done than just dealing with the traumas of the mundane world. Not that we shouldn't deal with trauma, of course we should. But yeah, so a background in clinical psychology and in spirituality and theology, and I've been doing work with plant medicine since like 2003, working with all these different communities in Oakland. Took a break from Oakland and came home and was ready. Saw that things were getting legalized, and I was like, great. And I come to the above ground, and it's the whitest space in the world. And I know that some folks are like, well, it's plant medicine and we shouldn't be talking about race or anything. Yeah, okay, except for, when the entire city of Oakland is this like multicultural, like beautiful tapestry of like diverse personalities. And yet when I go into psychedelic space, it's the whitest space I've ever been in. It's cause for pause. And so the above ground was not doing a lot for me. I was not very excited about it. I was not seeing this people addressing the needs of my community. I mean, when you talk about PTSD, look, African Americans, but just not really seeing that, even talking to some of the veterans groups, which I have a lot of respect for, and seeing a lot of vets really being helped. But then when I looked, well, where are the Black vets? Vets of color are responsible for about like 70% of like vets in the US, and not seeing them get the treatment. I was like, what's going on here? So I got a little frustrated and I got a little fed up, and I was like, okay, that's it. I'm going back to the underground. The underground is where I live. The underground is where I'm from. The underground is where I'm going. And whenever I, have a big life decision and do a journey myself, and the medicine told me, you got to make a documentary about Black people and psychedelics. And I was like, you are wrong, medicine. I said, I am a writer. I am a therapist. I am an educator. I am many things. I am not a filmmaker. This is a message for someone else. Point me to them. I'll be sure to give them the message. And it said, you gotta make a documentary about Black people and psychedelics. And I was like, I've seen other people do this. I've seen other people make documentaries. It's not fun. It's not easy. It costs a lot of money. I do not have a lot of money. Please, give this to someone else. And it said, you got to make a documentary about Black people and psychedelics. And in the traditions and cultures that I come from, if you get a message 3 times and you ignore it 3 times, then you are cursing yourself. So in an attempt to not curse myself, I decided to make a documentary about Black people and psychedelics. Fortunately, I had help not only from Spirit, but also from a bunch of awesome people. Every time I thought I couldn't do it, someone would show up with some money, someone would show up with some skill, someone would show up with some talent. And so we premiered, I think it was 2023, maybe 2024, at the big Psychedelic Science Conference in Denver to rave reviews. Since then, we've shown the film in London, Oxford, LA, Boston, Detroit, Minneapolis, Portland, Oakland, Atlanta. Every place we've shown it, just evidence of Spirit has been all around. There are so many people who are hungry for themselves, hungry to see themselves on screen, to see themselves in this conversation. Black people who've been doing plant medicine work for 30, 40, 50 years, saying, finally, this is me. Finally, I'm seeing myself, and again, no disrespect to maps or anything else, but when you look at those images and you think, okay, well, that's what it is. It's kind of like, well, then what about me? And so for those people, especially those Black people, and not just those Black people, we have a lot of focus on women. We have a lot of focus on people of color. We're showing who actually is doing this work on a regular basis. For those folks, this film has been really useful. After all that touring, we finally put the film online last week. So if you go to atableofourOwn.org, you can watch the film, you can watch the trailer. And you can rent the whole film on Vimeo. But yeah, that's a little about me, and that's a little bit about this film. Is that good?
That is better than good. That was amazing. That was amazing. And we also, we're going to watch that trailer now. Gordon's going to load it, but also know that link is going to be coming in the chat as well. So just keep your eye out for it. So Gordon, I think we're ready.
When I would hear psychedelics, I would see lab coats, white people, orgies, Woodstock. But when I say fungi plant medicine, it takes me to the earth, brown people.
Who were you before you became the voice of your oppressor? Who were you?
You had to see that ugly side because all obstacles precede glory.
I want to just disabuse you of the notion that the scientific community wants to make this more appealing to Black people. The scientific community don't give a fuck about Black people.
In June, I had to stop.
As I listen to you all talk about white space, I've also been told that I have to love them all. And I don't know how to do all of that.
The medicine told me that I needed to figure out how to bring medicine to Black people. Black people need the medicine for their liberation. It needs to be in places that they feel safe to be themselves.
And the shit just hits different.
You guys are coming to circle after circle after circle to learn how to recognize and move with Spirit. I know we walk in the room with it.
There's not a muggle in sight. There's not a muggle in sight.
There's a way to use these tools to really break generational curses, right? Yeah. Now our poison is our medicine.
Not everything that is sacred needs to be shared.
It's a melanated emergency.
I want people to see psychedelics as a tool in the toolbox, not necessarily a solution.
I'm a roach. It's I You know, to them, I'm like herpes. Like, I'm here. I ain't going nowhere. There's nothing you can do to get me out of here.
What does it mean to look at your shadow and to actually cut off its head, conquer it, and go into the space where there are our brothers and sisters who are on the mushroom?
I'm like, the case should be dropping.
Awesome. Thank you, Aize. And then last but not least, Maxie Cohen is with us. And Maxie, can you tell us a little bit about your film, about your background? You can say where you are. I assume you're also not in Maui. Oh, you're muted, I think. Oh, you're muted again.
I'm really looking forward to seeing A Table of Our Own. I'm so moved that you did this film.
Thank you.
I just want to say in 1996, when I was part of a Santo Daime church in South Central, and I was like in such a minority, being in a room with African Americans, Latinos, and Koreans in a time right after the riots for healing, was the most extraordinary experience to be in that church. So I'm really glad you made this film. And Dream, I love your trailer. I love this film. And I'm so upset that the FDA did not make this approval so that we can be finished with this chapter and move on and see this amazing film that you've been making. So in my lifetime, I hope we get to see it. And I'm sure Rick feels the same way. So in 1989, I first drank ayahuasca, and it was the most extraordinary experience I had had in my life until then. And as a filmmaker, that's how I explore what I need to know and learn. And I was just so curious. And so I decided at that moment, after that first work, I had to make a film. It
didn't take you 3 times.
Well, in 1998, there were arrests in Europe and in the US of people who were leading ceremonies in the exact same way that they were being done in Brazil, in the legal churches of the Santo Daime and the UDB. And while I don't think there were 1,000 people drinking in the US at the time, I mean, I don't have any idea, but there weren't many. And we were very underground using code words. I mean, for 10 years while I was making this first film about ayahuasca, on the one hand, I said, or we said, silence is our best protection. But I had to make a film because I thought if things got really difficult, that I needed to have something to show the government of the value of ayahuasca, because it was so misunderstood by governments. And that's why I made this film. And for 10 years, people would say, what are you making a film about? And I would say, well, I'm making a film about a leaf of one plant brewed with the vine of another plant for visioning, healing, and communing with the divine. And people would say, oh, because I knew if I said that and anybody knew ayahuasca, they would say, oh, ayahuasca. But nobody said that for a very long time. So I made a film called The Holy Give Me about the Santo Daime and also about the UDB and the legalization. And then in 2015, I think it was, I don't remember what year, I saw a rough cut of From Shock to Awe. And From Shock to Awe is about veterans who you see how screwed up their lives are, who've come back from Iraq and Afghanistan and who are suicidal. And you see them finally give up on everything the VA has to offer and do ayahuasca. And you see them doing ayahuasca up to a year and a quarter later. And I felt I could help that film be finished. So I came on as executive producer, and I did it because I felt, what's more patriotic than healing our veterans? And this could bring people together. And in fact, we took the film to Congress for a briefing, and it was the first time I was told that anything positive about something mind-altering was presented in Congress. And then I didn't want to make another film about ayahuasca, but I felt that now that it was known in 70 countries, and that people were really curious, and it was now in your spell check, that it was extremely important to preserve its sacredness, to kind of protect it and protect people. And so the film I'm making now, Ayahuasca Diaries, goes from what's mind-bogglingly transformative with ayahuasca to how it's actually changing world culture, and very specifically in my film about how it's saving the Amazon. How people who drink ayahuasca, what it's done in terms of their connection to nature and how they've changed their lives to help the Amazon. And it's very much through the lens of ayahuasqueros, spiritual leaders in Peru, Brazil, Ecuador, and Colombia, because I wanted people to be able to see how it's being used by the original people who gave us this gift. And I also wanted people to see what it is that we're doing to them. What is this relationship? And to inspire sacred reciprocity. So, and what I've noticed, I want to say one other thing. I've noticed just in the test screenings that we've been doing, it's in a rough cut form, so hopefully it's finished this year. For people who know nothing, it really satisfies people who are curious. And for people who are very experienced, it really does help people integrate, which I didn't think is possible. So, so that's what Ayahuasca Diaries is. It's a big arc.
Spectrum of sorts.
Big spectrum.
Hey, Gordon, I think we're ready for our third trailer.
These are just highlights.
I drank ayahuasca in 5 ceremonies, and that completely transformed my life. I never did heroin again.
I definitely have less fear of death, having died maybe 300 times in that 4-hour period.
The thing about ayahuasca is that, unlike therapy and any kind of medication you could take, it is permanent.
He tomado más de 3.500 dosis de ayahuasca, Natem, que me ha dado una gran sabiduría y conocimiento. Yo lo llamo planta maestra. Él es el Natem o ayahuasca es el profesor, verdadero profesor de la universidad y no de especialidad.
I had in my first experience, I had anaconda coming up my ass and coming up into my mouth and clearing all myself. And this jaguar came in and I had a whole experience there. And when I shared this experience, which I thought that was like wild because my body turned into an anaconda, he was telling me how he works. He told that this is how he do cleansing.
Let's say you take a plane to Lima, you have your backpack and your Tivas on, and you're ready to, go to the Amazon to drink ayahuasca, and some people just don't come with a plan. They just know that they're gonna figure it out when they get there. Or maybe they've done some research on Yelp. Yes, Yelp.
¿Y cuánto tengo que tomar?
Una dosis es 2 dedos.
2 dedos. ¿Y qué? ¿Lo tomo en mi casa? ¿Cómo me lo tomo?
Puedes tomar en tu casa, para hacerle, ves, 2 dedos, tomar poquito, poquito.
Como não somos povo do dinheiro, para nós, a gente tem dificuldade.
Because of this kind of, I don't know, invasion of capitalism into their world, into their region, it's just inevitable.
We're one of the first nations to have this contact with Western science. That is why the scientific name of the ayahuasca vine is Banisteriopsis carpi.
The FDA has approved a phase 1 clinical trial of ayahuasca that will be executed at Ames Institute in Seattle.
The regular use of ayahuasca can fend off the consequence of leaky gut. It can mitigate chronic low-grade inflammation, and if it does, then all the consequences of chronic low-grade inflammation can be prevented.
Es la guía para seguir perviviendo, seguir resistiendo a todos los conflictos que nosotros hemos vivido en nuestro país, Colombia.
El papá de mis hijos fueron masacrados, 8 personas. ¿Y cuántas mujeres quedamos solas? Que muchos han sido desplazados, los pueblos indígenas, y andan sufriendo en Bogotá, mendigando.
Que por otro mundo lo llaman trastorno de estrés postraumático. Y para nosotros es la posesión de esa mala energía, de ese espíritu que nos quiere hacer daño a nosotros.
To protect the Amazon, we must protect indigenous rights and territories.
I work like crazy to sign contracts with them so that I can help them. I've done a lot of microfinance, so to help them, get money to pay for lawyers to defend their rights, etc., in a way that we create a balanced economy. But then in all these negotiations, I was always facing, we cannot sign the contract now, we don't have the agreement. We talk to the trees there, and they don't agree.
I think one thing we can learn also from the indigenous communities, for them there is no such thing as individual health. The individual health is completely connected to the community health and to the health of the territories, of nature.
When we look back at all these social changes that came so fast and so furiously, women going from the kitchen to the boardroom, gay people from the closet to the altar, black people from the woodshed to the White House within a generation or two, the one ingredient that's always sort of expunged from the recipe of social change is the fact that millions of us, for better or for worse, lay prostrate before the gates of awe, having taken a psychedelic. During all that era, the reason so much heat came down on these substances is because they were so subversive, and our parents would say to us, don't take that stuff, you'll never come back the same. And what they didn't realize, of course, is that that was the entire bloody point. We didn't want to come back the same, and we didn't.
What's interesting, thank you, Maxie. Thank you for that. What's interesting is that I've seen parts of all of your work over the past, 2 months or 6 weeks or so since we've been talking about this event. And I've watched your work over the course of that time, but to watch it back to back, to see your trailers and to hear your stories back to back, it really is quite something. The variety that we have in front of us, the variety of stories, but also I'm having a hard time articulating it. I feel like I'm a little bit in awe. The ending on Wade Davis there I thought was also quite beautiful. But I'm curious as to what your reflections are in seeing the 3 trailers back to back and the variety of stories and the diversity of stories. Also, variety doesn't feel like quite encapsulating my point of view, but are you guys following what I'm saying here? It's
Yes.
yeah. What are your thoughts on that, Aize? Can you articulate it better than me? I'm saying grasping at straws, but
well, what comes to mind for me is when people talk about the psychedelic community, and I always have to correct people. I'm like, there's psychedelic communities, right? There's lots of different folks working in lots of different ways. A lot of us towards a similar agenda, but there are some important and significant differences that, one of the things I've learned from plant medicine is that difference is really helpful and really useful, right? And that I can, sympathize and appreciate, Rick Doblin's struggle and the struggle of Native Colombians and Brazilians without it having to be my struggle, but I see the similarities and be like, yes, I lend my strength and support to their struggles as I hope they lend their strength and support to mine.
Yeah. Maxie, Dream, anything to add?
I wanted to say, because I haven't spoken since I've experienced both of those trailers, Aize, your trailer is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I'm so looking forward to seeing the film. It's been on my in my awareness, and now I'm really just excited to see it. And Maxie, yours as well. Really just extraordinary work, both of you. What I was really struck by, I would say, is very similar to what Aize shared, maybe from just a slightly different lens, but I've been feeling so much lately about how we can have our individual experience. For example, I'm here, I am on Maui, I am with the turtles, I'm in a deep healing journey, and I am aware of how much my heart aches when I saw that tree being chainsawed, and how I can feel the depth of the disparity even in the stories that we're all sharing and telling. And so that there's a multiplicity of experiences happening at all times. And the way that these different projects kind of weave a tapestry of an ecosystem that is, it's not a space, it's not, it's an ecosystem that we're speaking about when we speak about these medicines, and for me, I come at this project from a very different lens, for example, than my brother, right? I first met medicines in 1987, and they saved my life and have continued to inform and shape my relationship with the world. My brother had never had an experience, and so it feels to me like what we're seeing here, I almost felt like it was like a graduation of experiences when it comes to spirit in some way. Like here we are, we have this community of folks that are predominantly focused on science and how science can help support specific traumas or specific diagnosis, for example. And then we moved into Aize's film where they were really speaking much more from the root of medicine as a connection to spirit and the divine. And we went into Maxie's film, which felt like it brought us out a bit more into a broader perspective of how medicine work is so directly connected to the ecosystem of which we are, and that you cannot separate the two in disparate conversations. So it feels like a beautiful macrocosm of what we're all in right now. And I really appreciated it very deeply.
Yeah, the order was interesting too. I thought it was purely coincidental, I'll have you know, but it really did flow through a bit of a narrative in a really nice way. Is there anything that you have to add there, Maxie? No? Okay. The other thing that I thought about as I was watching the trailers is I think that the title of this panel is all around psychedelics in film. And I'm curious about, when you think about psychedelics in film, certain things pop up into your head around what is on the big screen with respect to psychedelics in film. And I'm curious about any of you have any thoughts about those representations of psychedelics, and I guess the juxtaposition to the 3 trailers also that we just saw, because it's quite striking.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it if that's okay. You know, my first experience of psychedelics on the screen was the movie Altered States with is it John Hurt? I think it was. And it made psychedelics look like this. I mean, he transforms into this like man beast, and it's this whole thing. And I watched it recently, and I was like, oh wait, he was just tripping on mushrooms? Like, wow, homie, okay, like that was a lot there, you know. And one of the, you know, we made a documentary, right? We didn't make a feature film, and thinking about why, it's because film is structured around spectacle, right? There's got to be some dramatization, a visual dramatization of some sort of realistic event. I don't think that's an appropriate place to put psychedelics or mind-altering compounds, right? Especially if you take for granted that they are sacred and holy to people, right? It would be like, you know, filming I don't know, filming a you know, Sunday service, and then having like a dead body in front and having somebody like cutting pieces of flesh off of Jesus and like shoving it into people's face, and then like wringing out his arm and having a full glass of blood and pour, you know, it's like it's inappropriate, you know. And even in the documentary setting, you know, people are like, oh, so you're going to show people taking medicine, and I'm like, why would I do that? Right? I think we even had it in the trailer. You know, someone says, not everything sacred is meant to be shared. Right? So the film aspect for us focused far more on culture, focused far more on community, and focused far more on the results of doing the work with the medicine, as opposed to this is what it looks like when someone does medicine. Because I've seen people take a lot of medicine and stay still. And I've seen people take a little bit of medicine and dance around naked for 5 hours. So there is no one representative expression of taking medicine. I think that's really important to hold on to, because so much of our culture, you know, is this sort of trendy, like, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to behave thing? And one of the great things about working with plant medicine is, you know, come as you are and be who you are.
Yeah. That's a really unique answer. I was anticipating an answer around just general stereotypes and Seth Rogen, or that's a far more astute answer, I think. Can you talk to me also, you referenced there the big screen. Are there expectations? Talk to me about distribution or access to your stories. I think it's also became immediately evident while we were watching the trailers that 2 of the trailers, the films we can't yet watch. So talk to me about how hard it is to get your stories out there. I know the big screen is a whole other beast unto itself these days with respect to big titles and studios, but talk to me about how it's been getting your films watched. And then we can start talking about funding too. But first let's talk about viewers. Is that a question that jumps out at anybody?
Well, I might just say, like, I don't know of another film that has changed or saved more lives than From Shock to Awe. And what's remarkable about it is that usually a film has an 18-month life. That film continues to build, and it's only word of mouth, because we really never could raise the money to really get it out there. And I think it was a little bit early. You know, I've heard now that, I don't know what's happened to that film, but Participant is making a film about vets and maybe it's MDMA. I don't know. But then I heard Participants going out of business, or went out of business. So I don't know what happened with that. But, you know, I hope that with this film, I'm not too late. I've had a hard time often being too early. So, you know, and the landscape has changed a lot in the last couple years. And I just hope that somehow the landscape changes a lot more and it to be in greater favor to all these films here.
I'm gonna go, I have a big list of questions here. So I'm gonna go to my big list of questions. You know, the first one was here around what inspired you. And I think we've really covered that. And I think inspiration came from two of you through journeys, which I think is really a really interesting dream. How did your movie start? How did that come about?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, my origin story with the film is I have a different response than my brother, for example. From my perspective, this film is extraordinarily spirit-based. That's the lens through which I view the world. So it's always going to be the lens through which I share my perspective. And I can see how Rick's journey has been woven into my life and my brother's life since childhood. You know, we ended up, I lived on a very small island as a young woman, as a baby, actually, that Rick has family land on, that only 8 other people have land on. And that's, you know, so, and my brother went to the same school as Rick did, and Rick was in Nirvan's first film. But if you want like a very straight answer, we were at Burning Man, and I was there for the first time. I'd never been to Burning Man before. My brother went in the late 90s and had been speaking about Burning Man, but I was living a very different life. And my father had died, our father died, and my husband died. And so I went to Burning Man to bring ashes to the temple. Nirvan took me to see Rick speaking, and he knew that I'd had a long history with these medicines and that they'd been a part of my life for a long time. And he took me to see Rick speak, and I heard a voice in my head, as I sometimes do. And some people might call that crazy, but I like to just call it the divine or spirit. And I heard, you need to make a film about this man. And I wasn't a filmmaker, you know, and I was like, huh, but I knew enough because I'm a dreamer, and I get instructions and I just follow. That's the way I live my life. And so I saw my brother standing in line as well. He'd been sitting across the room from me, standing in line to speak to Rick. And I elbow him like the, you know, bossy big sister that I am. And I'm like, we need to make a film about this guy. He's like, I know, that's why I'm up here. You know, and I thought he was going up to say, oh, remember me back in the day, or whatever it's been. So that's my origin story with the project. My brother's origin story goes back. You know, he'd been tracking kind of Rick's journey, and he'd been interested in the more scientific aspects of medicine. It was helping him understand more deeply the context, and he'd been following the story since, you know, he was in undergrad and went to the same school as Rick. So we have different ways we entered, but we both entered through what I call guidance and vision, and what Nirvan calls ideas. And, you know, we come from the same space of like curiosity and awareness around the power of storytelling to shift culture.
So all 3 of you, again, this sense of passion, of purpose, of this innate drive. I referenced earlier the notion of funding. So talk to me about when you have such a pull or a draw, or talk to me about funding. How hard is this when you have such a very clear dream? You had a vision, Ise, you had 3 visions. Burning Man, and I can't imagine also going to Burning Man with such loss. Talk to me about when there is such a rooted purpose in a task, there isn't necessarily the funds. Like it's your dream, but not everybody else's. So talk to me about how did that look and work for all of you? Aiza, you're nodding, so let's go with you first.
I mean, I'm just laughing because, you know, the biggest funders in the psychedelic space knew that I was raising money for this film, and none of them supported. One, I even got an email, and I can't believe that they wrote it down. They said that we don't think that having more Black people in the psychedelic space is aligned with our goals as an institution. And I was like, wow, you wrote that down. You're lucky I'm a nice person.
That's a shocking email.
You know what I mean? So
That's
and you know, I had one funder, and you know, they don't want to be known. But the funder, and basically what they did was they matched pretty much everything that I put in. I put damn near all of, I put half of this movie on my credit cards. That's pretty much it. I'm still paying them back. But that funder, they were going to be doing a training somewhere. They were about to be a student in a program. A mutual friend said, hey, you should talk to Aiza about psychedelics. We sat, we drank whiskey, we talked for 4 hours. They had to go home. I said, all right, see you later. They called when they went home. They said, hey, we didn't talk about your movie. I said, oh yeah, well, we can talk about it tomorrow over brunch if you want to. And we had brunch the next day. They're like, hey, I want to support any way that I can. And to me, when I say like spirit kind of shows up, that's what I mean. I got to a point with the film where I could either make the film or I could raise money for the film. I couldn't do both. And I was told to make a film. I wasn't told to raise money to make a film. And so I was like, okay, you know, like initially our plan was like, if people needed childcare, we were going to give them that. If people needed, you know, needed support, like any support that folks needed to get in the room, we were going to do that. We weren't able to do everything we wanted to do, right? But we did fly people out who couldn't afford to come out on their own. We did pay for everyone to have lodging and food, you know, like we gave what we could, and we were fortunate to find out that that was enough, you know. So it could have been a different film with more money, but we took what we had and we made the most of it, which I think is like the blackest thing in the world that you could possibly do. So when I say it's like a Black movie, that's what I mean. Like, give us the things you throw away and we're going to make something awesome out of it.
A reminder to everybody that's watching about the link that's in the chat. Maxie, the link is there. Yeah, I think Gordon put it in. Maxie, what about you? Talk to me about funding. And I'm inferring likely struggles, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. But yeah, talk to me a little bit about.
I think this is a very Black film. It's the same thing. Though I'm starting to think, what if I don't try to raise the money and I just keep making the film? Will somehow the divine show up? You know, I made this film because I heard this guidance to do it, but then I don't know. I have to admit there was part of me saying this has to happen because I was feeling also so protective of this entheogenic plant medicine. You know, I didn't even like calling it psychedelic, you know. I find that it's very difficult, and it's difficult to raise money, and I'm very proud of the fact that this film looks as good as it does, sounds as good as it is, and is as ambitious as it is, which may have been overly ambitious, but I thought it was, I think it's really important. And what I do want to say is that I think supporting these films is very important. And the reason why is that, is that people who have the means to be philanthropic, who are enthusiastic about the value of all of these opportunities, this plant medicine, MDMA, whatever, need to see that the kind of education that we offer is what's going to make investors who are investing in companies more understanding, or investing in science or universities, or more understanding of the value of these. One of the major reasons I made this film is for therapists, because I have a psychiatrist in this film. I talked to 6 psychiatrists. They all said there was nothing like ayahuasca to deal with mental health that efficiently and that quickly. And I mean, even the psychiatrist in the film tells us about somebody who tells a story who said, a very straight psychiatrist, said he would have thought the guy was psychotic. He would have given him a drug to turn off what he was seeing. And now he realizes that what he was seeing and what he was receiving was a gift. And so if people are doing these kinds of ceremonies and then they go to their therapist, I mean, actually, this did happen to me in 1980 something, and the therapist said, stop doing that. That's like really crazy. And I stopped doing therapy because the ayahuasca was so, it just was like 20 years of therapy in a night. So I think it's really important to educate government, to educate therapists, to educate potential investors, to educate potential researchers, to educate people with PTSD, to educate people who are suffering. And we are providing that service. And so these films are at the forefront of opening up understanding of what's really available to people. So I encourage philanthropists. I have gotten some bigger checks, and I've gotten an $18 check. And I think, okay, $18 is going to let me feed an intern for the 2 interns I have, or the 3 interns I have. I'll be able to, that'll feed lunch. That's valuable. So I think anything that people contribute towards these films, towards making them, is joining the larger community of making these incredible, incredible medicines known. And of course, we can use, if you can go to ayahuascadiariesfilm.com and you can donate and learn more about this film.
I'm all for all the plugging. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Isaiah.
Well, I just wanted to respond to that because I think it's such a great point in that, we all, well, I hope we all know that, at least in the US, the FDA knocked down, the approval of MDMA for PTSD. And I kind of saw that coming. And one of the reasons that I saw that coming is exactly, kind of what Maxie's talking about, what I've been talking about, and that the image of who was using these compounds and who was in favor of these compounds. What Lycos was showing, what MAPS was showing to some degree, wasn't the full picture of the people who benefit from these compounds. How do you see that full image? How do you see that full, kaleidoscope of folks who are invested in this? It comes from things like film. It comes from things like podcasts. Revolutions don't happen because the FDA says it's okay. Revolutions happen because a large number of people are already going towards the thing, and the government is trying to catch up with it. And so I think it's a really good point that Maxie's making, is that we have to show, yes, for people who are curious, but also for people who are already deeply invested in this, that we are, not all screwed up, not all drug addicts, even though some of us are, not all no offense to anybody, stoned out hippies everywhere, but we're mothers, we're fathers, we're doctors, we're lawyers, we're artists, we're all these different people that are saying this has a fundamental benefit to us all. And if you are making this illegal, you're making humanity illegal, and that's a problem. So I think all of these films have the potential to do that in ways that maybe weren't seen at the time of the FDA decision.
Yeah. Thank you for adding that. It's a really beautiful point. I do also want to give Dream the opportunity to talk about funding, because I know that that is an important thing for all of you. So share, do your experiences match that of Aize and Maxie's?
I mean, our
yeah,
our experiences very much do mirror that. You know, it's when we started making this project, my brother and I, it's been a passion project for us. So we put in our own resources, and we're not, you know, extremely affluential people. So we put in our own resources. We were just like, this is what needs to happen. And we did that for a long time. And then blessedly, a few years ago, we kind of came out, and that was more like, it's been 10 years that we've been making this film. So at that point it was about 6, right? And we're like, we can't carry it anymore. We need help. You know, is essentially what we started to say. And we started to, and we also felt that we had invested enough ourselves and had enough content to share with people, and just enough idea around what the story could be. And so we started to raise funds, and we felt really grateful that we were able to host some fundraisers and receive some influx of capital in that allowed us to continue to storytell. And it's always been that, though. It's been like the, you know, the carrot kind of, it's like Aize shared, it's like whatever it is that shows up, the right person that's willing to either offer, you know, in kind, or bootstrap it with us, or whatever it's been. And I feel that now we're in a different kind of place. Like we've got an incredible EP that's come on board because they believe in the power of storytelling and the power of this particular story to help shift culture. And so I really trust that whether it's people in this you know, webinar listening, and they're, you know, hopping on our site to buy a t-shirt that helps support the film, or there are people that are listening that have gifts to give because it's the end of the year, or whatever it is. Like, I really trust that people are starting to recognize the power of storytelling and the role that storytelling has always played in culture, and film is a newer medium for that. But it's so clear that when you memorialize something, that you give people the opportunity to have so many different lenses and frames of experience, and it's really essential.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sharing stories are essential, and we learn by mirror neurons, and we learn by having this shared sense of awareness and understanding that we can't get from the isolation that we often feel. So to me, yes, has it been a profound challenge to raise funds? Absolutely. It's like you go from being a storyteller to like needing to put on a certain costume. You know, it's like you need to put on a costume, you know, and now I think that what's happening is that there's less and less costume. It's just the work is speaking for itself. The ecosystem is shifting, even though it's hard to make feature films right now and all these things. Like, there's just more and more awareness, I think, that of what it's going to actually take to shift culture, and the role that filmmaking and storytelling in general play in that shift.
And have you seen a shift? Have you, in your experiences, I guess I throw this to everyone, in your experiences, are you seeing that shift, or a greater understanding, or are you seeing still a representation of psychedelics as you referenced, like the Wolf Man? Is that still something that you are seeing? Because I in all three of your answers, you talked about fundraising, but you also really talked about accountability, and that you have a responsibility for educating along with this, which I don't think all filmmakers, I don't think, feel that sense of responsible, accountable. So that's a different type of filmmaking. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because I'm thinking, I have a question here around a broad audience. So how do you make something that is ethereal and spiritual appealing to a broad audience? But I think it's also, how do you make something intangible and also greatly misunderstood accessible? There might have been 20 questions in that one thing, but one of you can respond to it, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, that's the power of good storytelling. All these films look very entertaining. I mean, I need to entertain people. You know, I thought, you know, I look at the other films, the other trailers, I thought they were highly entertaining and interesting. I really, really want to see these films. And I think people who are curious, and I know there are a lot of people that are, the major issue is, and you know, hats off to you and hats off to Darren Aronofsky that he sees the value of supporting this film, Dream. The issue is the landscape for distribution, because I think there are people who want to see these films. The question is, how do they know about them? And how do they get seen? And to me, that is a major issue. I know I'm always surprised when I'm in a room where people who have seen From Shock to Awe just are so grateful for it and say they tell everybody. And then there are people in the room who never heard of it that would like to know about it. So I think distribution is a major issue, but all these films are being made by people who know how to entertain. So, you know, they're educational, but they're also highly entertaining.
Well, you know, to me, it's time that we actually decouple the notion that entertainment and education aren't the same. Like there's just become, it's because our education system has become so far from a joy-filled space for the most part, for most people, that we've lost this sense that, I mean, in education at its root is entertainment. Storytelling has been what has been educating us through time and space. It's the only way that we're all here in this room is because our ancestors knew how to tell a story. And so it's so far from like separate, you know, I guess I would just say. And I think that anybody who's making anything meaningful these days is thinking about impact, because if you're not, why are you on the planet, right? So if we're not awares of how, you know, we can create story that helps to bring people more joy, you know, more connection with themselves and each other and the planet, well, then what are we up to?
And it's clear that all of us are making these films from a place of great passion and sense of this is needed in the culture. So it's you know, I don't think any of us want to go broke and have to pay off our credit cards. And the truth is that what we're doing, you know, is of value to the culture. You know, these films are. I mean, look at Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. It shifted. It was a game changer for so many people I know.
It was a game changer, but I'll also point out the Netflix special was also, so if you want to talk about distribution, that I think the documentary series and the fact that there was a distributor, and I know many people on the webinar might not be as aware of the interesting world of distribution and exhibition and how films get made and that whole very complicated kind of messy process. But I will say that I think part of the impact of Michael Pollan's was the fact that it was like readily right in everybody's living room.
Right, but if I can, you know, I think this is part of the issue of like the capitalization of this work, because what gets popularized, what gets put out, kind of what you were talking about before, is what's the most quote unquote accessible avenue towards psychedelics. Like that's what can get promoted, funded, etc. You know, we four-walled, for those of you that don't know, you buy a theater space basically for a night, you pay for it in advance and you hope your tickets cover you, right? We four-walled 10 cities. Okay, we won two
tremendous amount of work. I'll just point out to sell all of those tickets and to promote it on your own.
Yep.
That is so hats off to you. That is a huge accomplishment.
We won at 2 film festivals, you know, like best documentary, right? Like we're in a very good position to get picked up, and we didn't get picked up. Now, part of it is the entire landscape of distribution changed right around 2021, 2022, you know, when Netflix and Hulu were buying up everything. They just went, oh, wait, you know what? We don't know if we can make this work, because all these mergers had started going on, right? And so a documentary about Black people and drugs that's not negative, that's I don't know, you know, it gets a little etchy. They don't know if they want it. But that tells you something about, you know, kind of like what Dream was saying, the education that people are being given about psychedelics in part is influenced by people like Michael Pollan, who have a specific agenda in terms of what type of psychedelic narrative is okay to present. And I think, like I was saying earlier, one of the joys, one of the benefits of smaller distribution, of the underground, of things like Shock and Awe being, you know, sort of like below the surface, is that you get a broader diversity of opinions and approaches to this work than this sort of staged, sanitized clinical model, which doesn't take in all the different ways, all the grief work, the death work, the doula work, the ancestral lineage work, you know, the land restoration work, right? When you talk about plant medicine, at least in my opinion, you're not just talking about plants. You're talking about people, you're talking about culture, you're talking about, you know, survival of the planet. And I think that sort of narrative is harder to package. Like when I'm not making documentaries, I write novels, right? I have
and good ones, apparently. They're very well reviewed. I hear the New York Times has recommended your work.
Right. From that perspective, the way to tell a good story is to keep it simple and make it accessible. Yeah. But one of the things one of my mentors said, Ilyas Farajage, has always said it to me. He said, keep it complex, because human life is complex and we like to see ourselves represented. And I think that's part of the dynamic challenge that happens in this work. It's complex, it's interesting, it's intricate, and it requires a different set of tools in order to really take it all in.
We're running to the time where I'm going to be passing it over to the Q&A, and I'm going to the Q&A, and I'm just, for the people on the webinar, I know that sometimes people might feel shy about putting a question in or are reluctant to do it. I just want to say you're in a safe space here. So please, if there is a question, or if I have a list of questions, so I'm more than happy to go and read them off, but I would love to have some diversity, and I would love to hear from you. And so feel free. I'm going to ask a question here, but I would love to see some questions pop up. So please, this would be a great time to do so. But I am curious as to, I guess it's a bit of a two-parter, not like a 10-parter like my last question. It'll be a two-parter, but the participants that are listening in, and my question would be, how can people that are listening in, how can they or organizations like the Psychedelics Association of Canada support you? Is it just a matter of money, or is it, what other ways are there?
Well, you know, I have been around the world on panels talking about ayahuasca. I'm like very good at answering questions in this space and helping people integrate and understanding what it is. And I get called upon to do that a lot. I'm always happy to be available to do things like that, show these films, talk about them. You know, I mean, I have dedicated a large part of my life of being available to help people heal So I'm available. What can I say?
And Dream, you're also, I think Dream and Aize, you actually are both also help, like you, Aize, are you you're a counselor, and I know Dream, you work with death in the death phase, grief counselor of sorts, or
I'll let Aize respond and then I'll happily share.
Sure. You know, there's a Canadian that I absolutely and totally respect by the name of Bruce Alexander, and he wrote a book called The Globalization of Addiction, which is one of the best works on addiction that I've ever read. If you really want to help me, fly me up to Canada, let me show the film, and then have a dialogue with Bruce Alexander. That would be my ideal from a Canadian audience. In the meantime, the film is on Vimeo. You can get it through our website, atableofourown.org. Get 20 to 30 people together in your house and watch it. Have meaningful dialogue about it. If you feel like donating, there's a little button you can donate after. We didn't do this to make money, like to, cover debts, but really, if I know that people are having real and meaningful conversations about that work, that's payoff enough for me.
Dream?
Yeah, I mean, I like to respond with, there are always so many ways to support projects like this. If for those people that don't have direct resources in the typical kind of way, or you're not going to write a check, there are sometimes people that that would be interested or engaging in supporting the project. So that's part of how this medicine community and communities have grown to be what they are right now. It's not because we all got funding from Netflix. So there are many ways that people have offered to host us events and fundraisers. That's been extraordinary, whether we end up raising a lot of money or we end up meeting amazing people that end up supporting in different ways. That's always an invitation, if you have somebody like that, to reach out, or anybody that you'd like me to have a conversation with. And that's where we are at this point. At this point, especially given the FDA decision and our commitment to tell the full story. It's been 10 years, so we're as Rick says, not be in spite of the obligations, but because of the actual challenges that are happening, we continue. So there's ways that you can support in that way. And then in terms of my work, I'm getting ready to launch actually a new program this week. And it's really on the intersection of so many different aspects of what I love: sacred medicines, death, dreams, mystical experiences, near-death experiences. I end up, working one-on-one with folks and offering death meditations and teaching in different ways. So there's lots of ways that you can directly connect with me that are outside of the film project. But really, I'm encouraging us to just reach out and support each other in whatever way is possible, because I know that we're all being nourished and guided and supported by so much that we're committed to giving back to.
That's beautiful. And also, we have a question, guys. So our prompts worked. So we have an anonymous attendee is asking, are there any other luminaries or leaders that you recommend us to learn from? So he's calling it, this person is calling it, Aize, your Bruce Alexander's Rat Park was part of my learning. So are there any other leaders or luminaries that you guys recommend?
Yeah.
A lot. You can see Maxie's face is like, but we can each name one or two. How about that?
I love Jeremy Narby's book, The Cosmic Serpent. Wade Davis has written, there's a number of people that have written books on ayahuasca. Just take a look if that's of interest, but I that's the one that pops into my head that I particularly loved. But I think there are quite a few.
So I want to mention one book, and then I want to mention an approach. The book that I absolutely love is The Immortality Key by Brian Marascu. I can't recommend that book highly enough. The approach is this, and it's partially informed by The Immortality Key. I think a lot of Europeans approach, Brazil, Mexico, Gabon, all of these different places looking for plant medicine because there's this idea that plant medicine, psychedelic healing does not or did not exist in Europe. And that's absolutely and fundamentally not true. I think what happened is that the plant medicine knowledge from Europe was held primarily by women over the age of 50 connected to the land. And so when people ask, well, what happened to it? Well, when you look at the disrespect that happens to European women over the age of 50 connected to the land, you get a sense of what happened to the European plant medicine culture. So I would recommend trying to go back, like instead of, go where you want to go, whatever, it's fine. But like, instead of going to Mexico, try Ireland, right? Try Scandinavia, right? Like try to make contact with those European elders, those European elder women, because the knowledge is the same. It's not different knowledge. It's just who was able to hold on to it and who wasn't. I learn most often from people and not from books. And so that's why that's kind of my sort of approach. That's what I would say.
There are so many books and teachers that, are kind of easy to rattle off for me, but I would say that for people that are really interested in learning more and connecting, psychedelic societies, it's part of the role that they actually play in the community it's a safe space, all willing, that you can go and meet people that have been either doing this work for a long time or are new to this work and looking to connect with each other and tap in locally where you are to getting some guidance. And if those don't exist, then obviously you expand your reach. But if you're blessed to have a psychedelic society in your ecosystem, connect there.
Which is so there are no more questions in the chat, but that's a really lovely way to end. So thank you for that, Dream, because we are a society and we are a community at the Psychedelics Association of Canada. So I want to say a huge thank you to you, Dream, Aize, and Maxi, for sharing your wisdom and all of your shared passion. It was really beautiful, and I really enjoyed today's discussion. I also want to thank Cheryl from the PAC for all of her help with organizing, as well as our fearless volunteer, Gordon, on the back end for all of your support. Thank you very much, Gordon. And I want to thank everyone who joined today for being part of this conversation. I want to just take one quick second to talk about the value of being part of the PAC, as Dream highlighted there. We are, I think, an amazing community and network for anyone interested in psychedelic medicines, from healthcare professionals or just people that are curious about looking into it or learning more. And when you support the PAC, it actually connects you to leading voices like our three panelists here today. But it also directly supports the work to make psychedelics medicines accessible to all Canadians and people around the world in a really safe and equitable way. So the best part about it is actually it's affordable to most at only $100 a year. So and that's a really important thing for us. So I want to thank you all for coming today, and let's keep this conversation going both within our community and beyond. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah. Thank you, Maxi. Thank you, Aize.
Good to meet you.